My name is Renata Solis, and I am 32 years old, and I was standing in my parents' living room holding a handwritten price tag that read $25, and it was tied to my grandmother's sewing cabinet with a piece of white twine, and something inside me went very, very still. The cabinet was Hungarian walnut, circa 1938. I had appraised it myself 11 months earlier as part of my parents' estate planning consultation, and I had written the number in my own handwriting on a document that was sitting in a manila folder in my bag at that precise moment. The number I had written was not $25. The number I had written was $4,200, and I had noted in my report that in a stronger regional market, it could go higher. My Aunt Vera was standing near the kitchen doorway, talking to a woman I did not recognize. A woman in a beige fleece jacket who was nodding and saying that she had always loved the neighborhood. My aunt had a paper cup of coffee in one hand and a clipboard in the other, and she was smiling the way she smiles when she has already made a decision and is simply waiting for the rest of the world to catch up. The front door was open. People were walking in off the street. Some of them were carrying things out. I want to tell you 2 sentences I said that afternoon, the only 2 sentences I said that afternoon before I walked out of that house for the last time. I am going to tell you what happened before I got to those 2 sentences, because otherwise you will not understand why I said them the way I did and why the room went quiet the way it did when I said them. If you are watching this and you have ever walked into a room and understood immediately that something was being taken from you, and you have understood it not with your heart, but with a very specific professional part of your brain that simply begins cataloging, I want you to hit subscribe before we go any further. Because this story is going to take a while and I want you with me for the whole thing. And while you are there, leave me a comment telling me where you are watching from and what time it is where you are. I read everyone. The sewing cabinet was my grandmother's. Her name was Marta Solis, and she came to this country with 4 suitcases and a cabinet that she had shipped separately and insured for more than the suitcases combined, which tells you something about what she valued. She made clothes in that cabinet, not as a hobby. She made clothes as work, as mathematics, as an argument she was having with poverty, and she won that argument. The cabinet had a fold-down front panel and 4 deep drawers and a mirrored interior and small brass fittings on the drawer pulls, and it smelled like cedar and something else, something I could never identify, that I later understood was the particular combination of her hand cream and her work. My grandmother died 7 years ago, and she left the contents of her home to my parents. My parents are Jorge and Sylvia Solis, and they are both in their early 60s, and they are not dead. I want to be very clear about that because everything that happened requires you to understand that my parents are alive. They were alive on the day of the estate sale. They were, in fact, at a hotel 40 minutes away because my Aunt Vera had told them that she would handle the clearing of some storage items from the garage, and they had believed her. Because Vera is my mother's older sister, and because my mother has believed Vera her whole life, which is a pattern I should have done more to interrupt. My parents' house is in Akron, Ohio. It is a 1,400 square foot house on a street called Garland that has a crack in the driveway that my father has been meaning to patch for 11 years. The crack has gotten 3 fingers wide. There is a porch light that works only if you pull the chain twice, and there is a decorative anchor above the garage door that has been there since before my parents moved in and that nobody has ever explained. I was not supposed to be there that Saturday. I live in Columbus, a little over an hour south, and I had driven up because my mother had called me 2 nights before and said that Vera was coming by to sort through some of the garage, and it might be nice if I came to say hello. My mother said this in a light tone, the tone she uses when she is hoping I will come but does not want to ask directly. And I told her I would try. Then I was awake at 4 a.m. the next day with a feeling I could not name, a pressure behind my sternum that was not quite anxiety and not quite dread. And I got in the car at 6:45 and I drove. I arrived at 9:08 in the morning. I know the time because I was listening to a podcast that ends at the top of each hour, and the last thing I heard before I turned on to Garland was the host saying, "And we will pick up here next week." I parked behind a silver minivan I did not recognize and behind 2 other cars I also did not recognize, and I sat in my own car for exactly 2 minutes with the engine off before I went inside. The front door was unlocked. There were stickers on things. That is the part I keep coming back to. Not the price tags, although those came immediately after, and I will get to them. The stickers first. There were small round yellow stickers on the lampshades and the end tables and the photograph frames. The stickers had numbers written on them in marker, $6, $12, $8. They were the kind of stickers that come in a craft supply pack, the kind with the peel-off back, and someone had gone through my parents' living room while my parents were at a hotel 40 minutes away and had priced their belongings for strangers. I stood in the doorway and I read the stickers and I counted them. There were 19 stickers visible from where I was standing. I did not move. A man I did not know walked past me carrying one of the wooden chairs from the dining set, the one with the slightly uneven leg that my father has shimmed with a folded matchbook for as long as I can remember. And he said, "Excuse me," and I stepped aside, and he carried the chair out the front door. My professional title is Certified Personal Property Appraiser. I have been doing this work for 8 years. I specialize in residential estates, which means that when a family needs to know the fair market value of furniture, art, jewelry, or household goods before a sale, a donation, an insurance claim, or a tax filing, they call me. I go into homes and I look at things and I assign them value, and I write reports that hold up in court and with the IRS and with insurance carriers. I know what things are worth. I have always known what things are worth because my grandmother taught me that value is not a feeling. It is a fact, and facts can be established by research. My grandmother also taught me to sew, and she did it at that cabinet, and I have not sewn anything since she died, but I have never been able to walk past a piece of furniture without knowing approximately what it is worth. I found the cabinet in the corner of the living room near the window, which is where it has always been. The handwritten price tag was tied to one of the brass drawer pulls with white twine. The handwriting on the price tag was Vera's. I recognized it from birthday cards and grocery lists and the one letter she sent me when I graduated from college, a letter I kept for 3 years and then could not find, which I now suspect was not an accident. $25. I held the price tag between my thumb and forefinger, and I thought about the appraisal report in my bag. I had done the appraisal 11 months earlier, when my parents had mentioned quietly that they might want to move somewhere smaller in the next few years and had asked me to come up and look at things. I did it on a Sunday, and I stayed for dinner, and my mother made her chicken with the green olives that leaves a faint, oily smell on your hands even after you wash them. My father fell asleep on the couch before 9 o'clock. I drove home in the dark and finished the written report at my kitchen table and sent it to them the following week. My parents had kept the report in the filing cabinet in the second bedroom, the room that used to be mine, the room that now has a treadmill and 3 boxes of Christmas decorations and a framed print of a lighthouse that nobody in my family has ever been able to explain. Or my parents had kept the report there. I would find out later whether it was still there. I would find that out in about 3 hours, and what I found would change everything about how I understood the previous 11 months. I want you to follow me through what happened next because the sequence matters. This is not a story where I stood in the doorway and had an immediate realization and swept in heroically. I want to be honest with you about the 30 minutes that followed, because in those 30 minutes, I was not composed, I was methodical, which is a different thing, and the difference is important. The first thing I did was walk through the house. I walked slowly, the way I walk when I am working, which means I was cataloging. The kitchen items had stickers. The set of copper pots my mother received as a wedding gift, a set that included a stock pot and 4 saucepans and a double boiler and had cost, when new, somewhere in the range of $600 and had aged very well, had a single yellow sticker reading $14 for the whole set. The small watercolor in the hallway, the one my parents bought on a trip they took for their 30th anniversary, signed by the artist in the lower right corner, had a sticker that said $30. I had not appraised that piece, but I knew something about it, because my mother had mentioned the artist once and I had looked him up the way I look things up, automatically as a reflex, and the piece was in the range of $300 to $400 based on comparable sales. I counted 29 items with stickers in the main rooms of the house. I was in the hallway, looking at the watercolor, when Vera came out of the kitchen and saw me. She said, "Renata." She said it the way you say a word when you are not surprised to hear it but wished it had taken longer to arrive. I said, "Vera." She said, "Your mother didn't tell me you were coming." I said, "She mentioned you were sorting the garage." Vera looked at me for what I counted as 7 seconds. Then she smiled and said, "We got a little ambitious," and she waved her hand at the room in a gesture that was meant to communicate lightheartedness and instead communicated exactly what it was, which was someone who had made a decision and was hoping the other person would absorb it rather than examining it. I looked at the copper pots through the kitchen doorway. I said, "Those are Mom's wedding pots." Vera said, "She knows. She said to clear out whatever wasn't useful. She's been saying for years she wants to simplify." I said, "She told you to sell the household goods." Vera said, "She told me to handle it, and I am handling it." I want to stop here and tell you something about Vera that you need to understand for everything that follows. Vera is 61 years old. She is 5'4", with hair she has worn the same way since the 1980s, pulled back in a style that was fashionable once and that she has kept because she decided it was her, which is a kind of conviction I actually respect. Even now, She has a house in Parma and an adult son named Derek who sells medical equipment and calls her every Sunday. She and my mother have been close their whole lives in the way that people can be close when one of them does most of the accommodating, and for as long as I can remember, Vera has been the one who organizes, who plans, who decides, and my mother has been the one who agrees, and then mentions quietly to me later that something was not quite what she would have chosen. Vera and I have never had a confrontation. We have never needed one because I moved to Columbus at 22 and I am polite and I do not visit frequently enough for friction to accumulate. But I have been watching her handle my mother for 32 years and I know the vocabulary. I know what it sounds like when she is managing something, and she was managing something. I said, I'd like to see her text message or her call. Vera said, she trusted me to take care of this. I said, I know she did. I want to see the message, and here's the moment I have thought about many times since that morning, the moment I come back to when I am trying to understand what was actually happening in that room. Vera looked at me, and for approximately 4 seconds before her expression settled back into its familiar arrangement of calm certainty, I saw something else in her face, something quick and unguarded, not guilt exactly, something more like the fear of someone who has not yet been caught but has just realized that being caught is now a real possibility. It was 4 seconds. Then it closed and she said, I don't need to show you anything, Renata. I almost said something else. I almost reached for a different version of that conversation. I almost let the things she had shown me in those 4 seconds make me want to give her a way out before I knew the full shape of what I was giving her a way out of. Instead, I said, I'm going to call Mom. Vera said, she's resting at the hotel. I said, I know. And I took out my phone and called my mother. My mother answered on the second ring. There was a television in the background. She said, Mija, are you there? Did you come up? I said, I'm here. I'm at the house. My mother said, oh, good. Is Vera managing okay? There's a lot in that garage. I said, Mom, did you authorize a sale? A general household sale? There was a pause. The television kept going in the background, some kind of nature documentary. I could hear what sounded like waves. My mother said, what do you mean? I said, the living room has stickers on everything. People are buying things, the copper pots, the watercolor. Grandma Marta's sewing cabinet. My mother was quiet for long enough that I counted to 6. Then she said, what? She said it very quietly. She said, what is a word you say when you have heard correctly but cannot locate a way to respond to having heard correctly? I said, I need you to come home, Mom. I think you need to be here. My mother said she was coming, and she said she was sorry, and she said she didn't know. She didn't know anything about this, and I told her that I believed her, because I did, and I asked her not to call Vera before she arrived. She said she wouldn't, and then she arrived 42 minutes later with my father, who had a newspaper folded under his arm and an expression of total bewilderment that I have never seen on my father's face in my life. In those 42 minutes, I stayed in the house. I did not touch anything. I did not remove stickers or stop the sale or ask anyone to leave. I walked through the rooms with my phone and I photographed everything that had a sticker, and I wrote down for each item the price on the sticker and my professional estimate of fair market value. I have a spreadsheet that I built for this purpose because I am an appraiser, and this is how I respond to things that are wrong, not with volume, but with documentation. This is what I found. 29 items. The combined sticker price of all 29 items was $312. The fair market value of all 29 items based on my professional assessment, and for 9 of them, the formal appraisal I had conducted 11 months earlier, was $11,440. By the time my parents arrived, 6 items had already been sold. The 6 items that had been sold represented a combined fair market value of approximately $900, which is to say that those items were gone. A woman in a yellow cardigan had bought the dining chair with the matchbook shim for $8, and she was not coming back. And I understood that, and I made a note of it, and I moved on. I need to tell you something about my Aunt Vera that I learned in the hour after my parents arrived, and the learning of it changed the shape of everything I thought I understood about the previous 11 months. I learned it not all at once, but in pieces, the way you learn things that have been arranged specifically so that you will not learn them. The first piece? My parents had, in the past 6 months, received 2 phone calls from a dealer in Cuyahoga Falls who said he was interested in acquiring estate contents, and both times my mother had told him they weren't selling. She mentioned this to me while she was standing in her own living room looking at the stickers on her own belongings, and she said the dealer's name, and the name was familiar to me, and when I went home that evening, I checked my phone and found a text message from that same name that I had received 8 months ago, not directed at me. A message that had clearly been sent to the wrong number that said, "Confirmed for spring, I'll plan for the full inventory." I had assumed it was a wrong number. I had deleted it. The second piece, 3 months ago, Vera had taken my mother to a doctor's appointment and then suggested they stop for lunch. And at lunch, she had mentioned, very casually, that the house needed so much upkeep and that there was all that furniture from Jorge's mother. And had my mother ever thought about whether she really needed all of it? And my mother had said, "I suppose not everything." And Vera had said, "Well, if you ever want help with that, I'm happy to manage it." My mother told me that she thought Vera meant someday. She thought Vera meant when they were ready. She thought managed it meant put things in storage or donate them to the church. She did not think it meant a Saturday in March with yellow stickers and a dealer from Cuyahoga Falls and strangers walking out with copper pots. I want to tell you something I have not said to many people. I had known for 11 months that my parents' belongings had substantial value. I had told my parents. I had given them a written report. And then I had gone back to Columbus and gotten busy, and I had not followed up, and I had not asked what they were planning, and I had not called Vera or mentioned the appraisal or done any of the small additional things that would have made this harder to do. I trained them to manage this without me because I was not there. And when I walked through that house that morning, I understood that my absence had been a condition of the plan working. You should know that about me. It matters. The moment my parents understood what was happening, my father sat down at the kitchen table with his newspaper still under his arm and looked at the wall. He is not a man who expresses things loudly. He has a quality of stillness that I have inherited and that I am not always grateful for. And he used it then. He was completely still, and then he put the newspaper on the table very deliberately and he said, "Vera." He said it the way you say the name of a person you have trusted for a long time and are in the process of revising your understanding of. Just the name. Flat. Final. Vera was still there. She had not left when my parents arrived, which I found interesting. She had positioned herself near the back door and she had let the remaining shoppers browse, and when my parents came in, she had said, "Jorge, Sylvia, I'm so glad you're here. This is all going so well." As if they had been expected, as if this was something they had planned together and she was reporting on its progress. My mother said, "Vera, what is this?" Vera said, "I told you I would handle it." My mother said, "I said the garage. The box is in the garage." Vera said, "I was trying to help. You said you wanted to simplify. You said it for years." My mother said, "Not Marta's cabinet." Vera, "Not Marta's cabinet." Vera looked at the cabinet, and then she looked at my mother, and I watched her choose her next line carefully. She said, "That cabinet has been sitting there for 7 years. No one uses it." And then my mother said something that I had not heard her say to Vera in my entire life. She said, "That is not for you to decide." There was a moment after that in which the room was quiet in a particular way, the quiet of a thing that has been arranged one way for a very long time and has just shifted slightly on its foundation. The woman in the beige fleece jacket who was still browsing the kitchen items quietly set down the item she was holding and moved toward the front door. I was still holding my phone. I had the spreadsheet open. I also had, in my bag, the appraisal report from 11 months ago. And I had photographed that report on my way out of Columbus that morning. I had added it to a folder on my phone along with the 47 photographs I had taken of the stickered items. Because when I drove up at 6:45 in the morning with that pressure behind my sternum, I had not known exactly what I was going to find, but I had known I might need documentation. And I am an appraiser. And documentation is the thing I reach for the way other people reach for their keys. I am going to tell you about the 2 sentences in a moment. Before I do, I want to tell you about the sewing cabinet one more time. The cabinet is Hungarian walnut, which is a different wood from American black walnut in ways that are not obvious until you know what to look for. The grain runs in a particular direction and has a particular figure, a slight ripple that you can see when the light hits it at an angle, and the color is a warm reddish brown that darkens with age rather than fading. My grandmother kept her shears in the bottom left drawer, wrapped in a piece of chamois cloth. The chamois cloth was still in there. I know because I checked when I arrived before anything else. I opened the drawer and looked because that is where my hands went. The shears are Solingen steel, vintage, forged with original handles. I appraised them at $280 as part of my report. The price tag on the cabinet was $25. The chamois cloth was not priced separately, which means Vera either did not notice it or did not know what it was. I think she did not know what it was. I think there are many things in that cabinet and in that house that Vera did not know what they were, and that is partly how she justified it to herself, the not knowing. If you do not know the value of a thing, you can price it at $25 and feel that you have been reasonable. I know this because it is what I almost did once, at the beginning of my career, when I was new and a client had what looked to me like a plain wooden side table, and I almost priced it at $80 and then looked more carefully and saw the construction details and the maker's mark and the date, and the table was worth $800. And I went back to my supervisor and told her, and she said, "Renata, the thing about this work is that not knowing is not the same as not mattering. The value is what it is, regardless of what you knew." I have thought about that table many times since that morning in Akron. Vera, after my mother said what she said, stood very still for a moment and then said, "I was doing what I was asked to do." My father said, "By who?" Vera said, "By both of you." Generally. My father is 63 years old and he has worked for 40 years in manufacturing, and he has a quality I have always admired, which is that he does not raise his voice when he is serious. He lowers it. He said, "Vera, I want you to close the sale." Vera said, "Jorge, there are people here. I can't just..." My father said, "Close the sale." Vera looked at my mother. My mother looked back at her, and I was watching my mother's face. And I want to tell you something true about that moment. My mother looked afraid. Not of Vera. My mother looked afraid in the way you look afraid when you have trusted someone your whole life and you are in the process of understanding that the trust was not returned, and the understanding is new enough that you have not yet decided what to do with it. And for a moment before the decision is made, you are simply in the knowledge of it, and it is very cold. I said, "I'll ask people to leave." Vera said, "Renata, stay out of this." I said, "This is my parents' house and they've asked you to close the sale. I'm going to ask the remaining shoppers to leave. And then the three of us need to have a conversation." Vera said, "There's nothing to discuss. I was helping." And here is something I want to be precise about, because people who know the story sometimes assume I was furious at this point, that there was heat behind what I said next. There was not. I was calm in the particular way I am calm when I am working, which is the calm of someone who has all the numbers and is simply waiting for the right moment to produce them. The pressure behind my sternum was gone. In its place was something very steady, like a weight set down on a flat surface. I said, "In 11 months of conversations and what sounds like at least 2 phone calls with the dealer in Cuyahoga Falls, did anyone at any point ask the appraiser what any of this was worth?" Vera looked at me. I said, "Because that's me. I'm the appraiser. And I wrote a report, and I have it here." I took the report out of my bag and I set it on the kitchen table next to my father's newspaper. I said, "The items in this house that I assessed 11 months ago have a combined fair market value of $9,640. The items that were sold this morning before I got here have a combined fair market value that I've estimated at $900. They were sold for a combined total of $51. Nobody said anything. I said, "The remaining items in this room have stickers totaling $261. Their fair market value is approximately $10,540. That's based on my report and my professional judgment for the items I didn't formally appraise." I put my phone on the table next to the report with the spreadsheet open. I said, "I want to know where the proceeds from this morning were going." Vera said, "To help your parents, to cover some of the property taxes." My father said, "What property taxes?" Vera said, "The ones that are due." My mother said, "Vera, they're not due until June." Vera looked at her coffee cup. I have thought about this sequence many times, the way you revisit a moment that contained more information than you could process while you were in it. What I understand now that I did not understand then, or did not yet understand fully, was that this was not the first time. This was not the first plan. There had been a plan that depended on my parents' trust and their inattention and their habit of saying, "Vera will handle it," and the plan had nearly worked. If I had not driven up that morning, if I had stayed in Columbus, if I had let the podcast finish. The dealer from Cuyahoga Falls arrived at 11:40 in the morning while we were still in the kitchen. He knocked on the open front door and came in and stood in the entryway and looked around and said, "Vera?" And Vera straightened up and said, "I'm sorry, the sale's been closed." And the man looked at her and then looked at the 4 of us and said, "We had an agreement." And Vera said, "I know, I apologize, we'll need to reschedule." And the man said, "I drove 40 minutes. And my father stood up from the table and walked to the front door and said, "Thank you for coming." And the man looked at my father for a moment and then left. Nobody in that room, including Vera, had a clear answer to the question of what Vera was going to do with $11,000 worth of my parents' belongings, priced at $312. I thought about what I might have done with the difference. I thought about it, and then I set it aside because I do not know for certain, and I have learned in this work that the value of a thing can be established, but the intention behind an act is not a fact I can put in a report. I can tell you what happened next, which is that Vera said she needed some air and went out to the back porch. I followed her. This was the only part of the morning I had thought about in the car on the way up without knowing exactly what I would be thinking about. I had thought about what I would say to her if there was something to say. She was standing by the railing looking at my parents' yard, which is a small yard with a bird bath and a woodpile, and a patch of grass that my father keeps in an almost aggressively specific state of maintenance. The bird bath had a thin layer of ice on it. It was still cold. Vera had her coffee cup, and she was looking at the yard, and she did not turn around when I came out. I stood next to her for a moment. The cold was specific, the kind that comes up from the ground rather than down from the sky, and there was a smell that is the particular smell of an Ohio March, which is ice melt and wood smoke and something mineral and clean. I said, I'm going to ask you to write a check to my parents for the fair market value of what was sold this morning, not the sale price. The fair market value, which is $900. Vera said nothing. I said, if you do that, I think we can leave the rest of this where it is. My parents can decide what to do next. That's not my decision. Vera turned and looked at me. She said, you were always going to come in and make this about numbers. I said, it was always about numbers, Vera. That's what selling things is. She looked at me for a long moment. She looked, I thought, tired. Not guilty exactly, but tired in the way of someone who has been carrying a version of a story for a long time and has just found out the story has a different ending. I felt, briefly, something that was close to sympathy. I noticed I felt it. I let it be there and I did not act on it. She said, I have helped your parents for 30 years. I said, I know. She said, I have driven them to appointments and helped them with the yard and been here when you weren't. I said, I know, and I'm grateful for that. And I need you to write the check. I want to be honest with you. I do not know what Vera was planning. I know what the evidence suggests. I know the price tags and the dealer and the timing and the conversation at lunch 3 months ago. I do not know whether she was going to keep the money or skim it or genuinely believed she was doing something useful at a price that seemed reasonable to her because she did not know what the things were worth. I do not know, and I have made a decision not to resolve that uncertainty with an interpretation I cannot prove because I am an appraiser and I only report what can be established. What I can establish is what happened next. Vera wrote the check. She wrote it at the kitchen table while my father watched and my mother sat with her hands folded and looked at the yellow stickers on her things. The check was for $900. It is in a folder in my filing cabinet in Columbus. My parents removed the remaining stickers themselves together over the next hour. My mother put on the kettle. My father went out to check the woodpile and came back and said nothing about the woodpile. The anchor above the garage door was still there. The porch light still required 2 pulls. The sewing cabinet is in the corner of the living room where it has always been, and the chamois cloth is in the bottom left drawer, and the shears are wrapped in it, and they are worth $280, and I am the only person in my family who knows that, and I intend to keep it that way. I drove home at 4 in the afternoon. I stopped once for gas, and once because I needed to sit in a parking lot for a few minutes with the engine on. Not thinking, just letting the heater run. I was tired, not triumphant. Tired in the specific way you feel when you have done a thing correctly and the doing of it cost you something and you are not yet sure what the something is. My grandmother's cabinet is still there. I drove up 2 weeks later and stood in front of it for a while. I opened the bottom left drawer and I looked at the chamois cloth and I did not take anything out. I just looked. Then I folded the appraisal report and put it in the drawer under the chamois cloth where I should have put it a year ago. The price tag is in a small dish on my desk in Columbus, the one Vera wrote the number on, $25. I kept it because it is a handwritten record of what someone thought my grandmother's work was worth, and I think it is important to know what that looks like, the way things get priced when the wrong person does the pricing. That is what I do. That is all I do. I find out what things are worth. I write it down. I will see you in the next one. In the weeks after that Saturday, my mother called me 3 times. The first call was to tell me that Vera had called her and said she hoped there were no hard feelings and that she had been trying to help and that she was sorry if it came across differently than she intended. My mother said she had listened and said thank you and hung up, and she did not say whether she accepted the apology or not, and I did not ask. Some things are between sisters. The second call was to tell me that a cousin on my father's side, a woman named Patricia who is 58 and teaches middle school and had been at a school play the day of the sale, had texted my mother to say that she had heard what happened and she was sorry and she wanted to come over and help my mother go through the storage boxes in the garage, the original request, the one that should have been the whole story. My mother said yes. Patricia came on a Saturday in April, and they spent 4 hours in the garage and found a box of my grandmother's patterns, paper sewing patterns in the original envelopes, 46 of them. And my mother called me from the garage while she was still holding one to tell me about it. I could hear her breathing change when she talked about the envelopes. I added them to my records. The patterns are modest in individual value, but the collection is worth something as a group. And more importantly, they are the kind of thing that should not be priced at $25 by someone who does not understand what they are. The third call was from my father, which was unusual because my father rarely calls. He is a man who communicates in small physical gestures and newspaper folding and the particular silence of someone who has decided something and feels no need to announce it. He called me on a Tuesday evening at 7:42 and said, "Renata." I said, "Yes, Dad." He said, "Thank you for coming that day." I said, "Of course." He said, "I'm going to patch the driveway this spring." I said, "Good." He said, "Okay." And then he said goodbye. Vera has not called me. I did not expect her to, and I do not require her to. The door is not locked, but it has not been opened. The thing I keep returning to is not the money. Although the money was real and the gap between what things were worth and what they were priced at was a real gap that represented a real loss, or would have. The thing I keep returning to is the handwriting on the price tag. Vera writes in a small, neat cursive that she has had her whole life, a handwriting you would recognize if you had seen it as many times as I have, on cards and lists and the label on a jar of soup she left on my parents' porch last February. She wrote $25 in that handwriting and tied the tag to my grandmother's cabinet with white twine, and she did not know what the cabinet was worth, and I am still trying to decide whether that makes it better or worse. I think it makes it exactly as bad as it was. The value is what it is, regardless of what you knew. I'll see you in the next.